Yeah, so I guess I'll go ahead and read that before I fall into another tangent. So what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Just Pick Something podcast, where we discuss movies and TV shows, and eventually short movies or something else. We got that in mind, but this time we're going to talk about one of my favorite movies, which was, or is, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? It's modern satire of loosely based on the Odyssey. It was released in 2000, directed by Joel Cohen and Ethan Cohen. Those names might sound familiar if you love movies because they've directed a whole bunch of really big movies. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, Hail Caesar, Inside Llewyn Davis, True Grit, Fargo. And as the time of recording this episode, this movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, can be streamed on Amazon Prime. So, I have seen this movie, I think, more times than I could count on two hands. I've lost track of how much times I've seen this movie. And Franco, I think you said this was your first time seeing the entire movie all the way through, right?
Yeah, so I've watched this like through bits and pieces. Like it'll be on like FX or something, and I'll be like channel surfing, and I'll see like a part where they go to the Ku Klux Klan rally.
Oh yeah.
Or the part where they're singing on the radio. Like, you know, some of the bigger like moments of the movie I'll actually have seen, and I was just like, what in the world is this? And someone was like, oh, it's like a retelling of the Odyssey. And I was like, that sounds super dope. And then I never watched it. And so when you were like, this is my favorite movie, I was like, I mean, that's an excuse, and I'll definitely do that now. So like, when did you like first watch this then?
Oh, okay. So here's the thing. It's a little hard to know because I watched this movie way too early in my life. I think I was maybe about 7 or 8 when I saw this movie because my parents or mom and dad loved this movie to the point that they bought the soundtrack, watched it repeatedly, bought the VHS tape that came out like the year or two after, right? I think this was probably one of the more memorable movies from my childhood that I have, which is really weird because this movie is quite heavy in a lot of themes that maybe I should have watched later and not so early, but I think I'm going to stick with the idea that I think this is a pretty good movie to show to a kid because it's pretty fun, has a lot of music and entertaining parts, but also kind of introduces a lot of like really serious topics in like a interesting enough way that might, you know, give a parent a chance to be like, oh yeah, you should, we'll talk about this later, or oh, it's way more complicated. But like, for example, the KKK scene, you know?
Real quick though, that's kind of crazy that both of us were like, yeah, no, these movies are definitely like, we watched them when we were 7 and we were like, this is definitely like kind of crazy to like watch that age to like off the top of our head, but we're like, you know what, actually in retrospect, perfect age to watch this show this to your kids.
Yeah. I mean, sure, it might be a little concerning nowadays to be like, maybe this child shouldn't be watching a movie with like sirens and cursing and like criminals or whatever, and also the KKK, which is I think the biggest part of like maybe a red flag for a potential movie not to show a child. But like arguably I think this movie does a lot of things really well, including showing the KKK in a really negative and scary light, you know?
So like the what is the guy running for governor's name? Is he the one? So the one he's running against is named after Homer, I think.
Yeah, Homer Stokes. Is that who you're thinking about?
Homer Stokes is the KKK guy, right?
Yes, he's the one that is mostly bald, has rimmed circle glasses. His running mate is like a little person, and he's like, I'm gonna sweep up the corruption of the government, friend of the little man.
Yeah. So I love how Appio Daniels, I guess, then like, okay, so that's the incumbent, right? The larger man.
I think so. I might be mixing up the two.
I want to say that it was like the incumbent was named after one of the characters from the Odyssey.
Okay, so the current governor in the movie is named Papio Daniels, right? His opponent is named Homer Stokes. He's the one running with the little person and is claiming to sweep up the corruption in government. Homer Stokes is also the Red Dragon, leader of the KKK in that area.
Yeah, so okay, so it's interesting they named Homer Stokes after obviously Homer from like the Odyssey, and I'm like, why would you name the Red Dragon KKK guy after the writer of the Odyssey? That's a weird choice. I don't understand a lot of the allusions. I remember reading the Odyssey when I was younger, and I'm a fan of Greek mythology, but I'm not gonna pretend like I understand all like the nuances and pretend like I read the epics recently.
Yeah, I read that in high school too. I looked into it over time because it's super famous, super like interesting, and also like I think you could say a lot of things in over time has borrowed from the Odyssey.
Oh yeah, so but I thought it was hilarious how the movie ends with him being like, yes, I am part of this like perfectly decent group of people known as the KKK, and everybody's like, yo, no. Like they obviously don't think that he's garbage because he's racist. I think he's garbage because he hates the
The
band.
Soggy Bottom Boys. Yeah.
Yeah, the Soggy Bottom Boys. But it was like one of those things where it's like, oh, it's so validating to get this guy like entirely get his butt whooped and
Yeah,
knocked out.
yeah. Well, that's what I mean. It's like, okay, if you're going to be a child watching this scene with the KKK, right? And I kind of want to talk about it later as maybe we start to discuss the overall plot of the movie, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty good introduction for a child, especially like for me growing up in the South, right? As a little kid, you're not exactly like, oh yeah, look, there's the KKK member over there. There's a KKK member over there, right? It's not like a thing you're actively learning in your life, right? You learn about it later as you learn about racism and history, right? So when you see it in this movie, it's like, what are we presented? This huge organized group of men wearing like these sheets and making them look kind of scary, right? They're all marching around this huge burning cross, and it's unsettling and worrisome, right? And then you see this black man who you've met earlier in the movie, and he's scared, and they're dragging him, and they're talking about like hanging him, and it's scary and it's mean and like horrifying, right? For like a little kid. And you're like, I want these people to not do this, and I want someone to save this guy, right? And then they're also kind of played a little bit like fools, you know?
Yeah.
Like when they save him, they're all kind of just standing around, just gawking at like what's going on around them.
Like the color guard, the colors.
Yeah, exactly. And then, the Cyclops, what is it? John Goodman's character catches it, and then he gets killed by the cross. And later, like you said, in the movie, everyone hates Homer because they're like, we want to listen to this music. You're interrupting that. Get rid of him. Like arguably, you could say that like, yeah, it doesn't go into the full history of the KKK, right? But like for a little kid, it's not bad to be like, this is why they kind of suck, and then you probably have a conversation about that later.
Yeah, because like on like a surface level, it very much reads like, oh yeah, no, like these guys suck for a bunch of like narrative reasons, but as you get older and you learn about that stuff, you're like, oh no, you guys suck like in general. Like the movies in like the grand scheme of things, yes, is kind of nice in the sense that it's like it doesn't go as hard into you guys as maybe someone would be like is necessary, but like very much on like a basic narrative level, they're like, we make sure that you guys understand you do not like these people. And that's pretty much like the basic what you need, especially because they're not super present in the film, so they're not like the main driving force of a lot of conflict. For what they do in the film, they do represent kind of how dumb they look, and as well as kind of like how backwards they kind of are as like in like thinking.
Yeah, they're painted so negatively that it feels like rewarding when you see them get their comeuppance. And like I said, I guess we'll talk more about it later, but like, man, it's scary to think now as an adult when you see this movie and you think about the larger, I guess, politics of it all, where you're like, well, what is this movie kind of implying? That the popular seeming candidate for governor, who has a lot of pull with the common people in this area, is also a KKK member who we get to see try to lynch a black man on screen. And that is unsettling because it kind of is like, that's right, the KKK in that time period was very, very aggressively like involved in politics to the point where it's like, oh yeah, all that is terrifying because that's right, these white supremacists were actively in politics and out about it.
That's definitely unsettling.
But okay, going to the beginning of this movie, it's kind of cool that they start with a song, like as they're escaping.
Yeah, I know. I very much like how music forward this movie is, because I guess it leads to the idea that it is based off like an epic song from Greek time, and then like just updated it to the time period that it's involved in. I very much enjoyed this movie musically as well, which is weird to say because it's not a musical, but a lot of people do sing.
Yeah, I mean, for a movie that's not a musical, there is a lot of music, and it's almost like music plays a big role in this movie to kind of set the time period and the tone, but also just to make this movie entertaining in a way that's like not slapstick comedy, which this movie also has.
Yeah.
It takes away some of the melancholy that it could be, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because there's a lot of like we were talking about before, where it's like the realization of certain things. You're like, oh man, if you think about like a lot of the situations that happen, like there are like a lot sadder bits in it. in regards to like how people are living, situations that they're doing, going through. It's kind of like, oh man, this is actually kind of like you sit on it for a little bit longer. There is melancholy to it, like you said, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most memorable parts of this movie is the music, right? Like, I don't know if you were in Atlanta around the early 2000s, but like, I remember the big song from this movie that I'm pretty sure won a Grammy eventually, which was "Man of Constant Sorrow." Right near the end, they're playing on the stage.
Yeah.
It's like on the radio and was a big hit for this movie.
Did it also win an Oscar, or did it just win the Grammy?
I mean, I think it was nominated for a lot of awards, but I know won a Grammy either for that song or for album of the year for like a motion picture, you know?
I wouldn't doubt it because it's a really good soundtrack in general.
Yeah, dude, I even remember listening to it in a Waffle House when I was like a kid. Yeah, man. Ah, man, and it feels like the music kind of go in hand with a lot of other things in this movie, right? Like, did you get some of the like religious themes that were kind of present in this movie?
A little bit, but I mean, it was unfortunately. You know what I should have done? I should have watched 2, 3 more times because there's a lot to unpack in this movie.
Dude, you didn't have to watch it 2 or 3 times. That's what you got me for. The guy who's watched this movie like 20 or 40 times. No?
But there's a lot to unpack here. It's a lot to like. One, there's the level of just like watching as a film, and there's two, understanding what they're getting from the Odyssey is like an entirely separate layer. Then thinking about like we talked about like the politics, the religious angle of it. There's a lot of different layers to this film, and it seems like on like one level it's like this is just a really cool movie, and then you get into it and you're like, oh man, like they get like really deep into some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the main like religious thing that I can think of is mostly just the guy who sold to the devil.
Oh yeah, Tommy.
And I'm like, did he really?
I mean, I think it's very much left for interpretation on purpose, right?
Right, because like the way he describes the devil very much lines up with the guy who's hunting them.
Mm-hmm. The prison guard or
warden or whatever. So like he's very much like exactly how the guy describes the devil being. It's like, okay, so is it like a literal devil, or is it like more of like the colloquial like white devil type thing?
I mean, honestly, I feel like you could probably interpret it as both or one or the other, because like I think the imagery of him representing evil is pretty strong, because it's also kind of like he kind of represents an evil of 1930s Southern America, right? A person who sees themselves above the law, even though they are the law, and they're judge, jury, and executioner. And he even, I think, one point says, I'm above the law, or is the one that decides when people die. And plus, arguably, for a black man in 1930s America, yeah, I could see that guy being your idea of what the devil would be.
That's fair. Another parallel between this and my favorite movie being about the criminal justice system and minorities.
yeah, bring it back in, man. Let's talk about 12 Angry Men again.
Exactly. All right, so in 12 Angry Men, right? The one guy does say he's an executioner. No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, like, that it is interesting that like prison does like play like a huge part in this, because you have to think like the reason that the main three characters start their journey in general is because they basically were like, I have no life after this. Like the way our system is formed at the current time, as well as like not too dissimilar to now, is like these people are gonna rot away in jail, come out and be like ancient. They have no life after that.
Yeah, particularly John Turturro's character, who goes along with his plan because he thinks there's a treasure at the end for him, but he's also like 2 weeks from release.
Yeah.
So because he went with him, he's not gonna get out, as he says, if he gets arrested until he's like 84.
Yeah, the other guy only had like a couple years left too, I think, right?
Yeah, they were not going to be well off once they got out, but you know, they're worse off if they get caught after they escape.
Yeah. And it was definitely interesting, because like also it's like one of those things where it's like in my brain I'm trying to like figure out how I like relate this to the Odyssey, because again that's like where it is, and I'm like, so what's like the allegory here?
I do have a list pulled up of references to the Odyssey. I knew a couple going into it. The Cyclops being John Goodman's character, right? Or the Sirens.
Yeah, like the Muses. Yeah, the Siren.
Yeah, exactly.
And then like him turning into a frog is like Cersei turning men into animals. Hey.
Yeah.
Blanked on animals.
Yeah, Yeah, Cersei turning men into pigs, and that's kind of when like Delmer, Tim Blake Nelson's character, thinks that his friend got turned into a toad.
Okay, let me think. I don't know if what you're looking at says it. The only thing I can think of off the top of my head is that the guy's hair gel is like the beeswax.
Ooh, actually, that might be a good catch. It's not in this list I have pulled up, but yeah, actually, I could see that being a good catch. Nice.
Because I was thinking, I was like, they made like a big thing about his hair gel, and I was like, that has to be like a reference to something.
Dude, honestly, yeah, I never put that together because I thought it was just a fun quirk of his character, but actually, I think you're probably right about that. Too bad we don't know the Coen brothers, so we could have just asked them, you know?
Let's call him right now.
Yeah, go ahead and call him on Discord. I'm pretty sure that's how you reach him, right?
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, good catch, man.
What was I saying? What else? Okay, so there's obviously, Homer Stokes is named after Homer.
And also, technically, the blind radio man could be Homer from the Odyssey, too.
Oh, I guess that would be true.
Did I just, like, blow your mind?
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. There was one part of the movie where I was like, oh, it's the guy, was it the bank robber? I thought was like a reference to the god of winds or whatever. I remember very clearly during a part of the movie being like, this is a reference to the god of winds.
So Babyface Nelson, or I guess just George Nelson, because he makes a point of being like, don't call me Babyface. This list that I pulled up from the internet says it might be a reference to the god of Hermes.
Okay.
And even like the very beginning, right, where the railroad man, blind and giving him this fortune, the blind fortune. Yep. Yeah. And then
the suitor, when he gets back home, is obviously the suitors in the Odyssey.
And like, I guess to tie it back into the discussion of like the religion, right? Like even that like baptism scene could be like when Odysseus's crew gets like drawn in by the lotus eaters.
Yeah, I was wondering if they were. It was interesting. I was wondering if the baptism people were the sirens too, because technically they drew them into the water, and the only person who wasn't was, what the heck is his name right now? The main character.
Oh, the one played by George Clooney?
Yeah, George Clooney's character, where he's
Everett.
The rest of his crew gets drawn into the water because they're singing.
His name is Everett, because he's like Everett McGill.
There you go. Laundry ladies, they're the sirens, okay. Soggy bottom boys, beggars disguised to infiltrate and get wife back. Baptism was the lotus eaters. See, that's why I still don't, because like the baptism is like very, very clearly getting drawn into the water and then being pushed under.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So that's why I'm like, it's the sirens, but at the same time, like the women are very clearly sirens.
So I feel like it could probably be interpreted like, one is clear in the way that, yeah, the women are in the river, they're singing their sirens, but maybe you can view the baptism scene as its own siren adaptation, where you're being lured into this water by chanting and communal singing, and like it's a very cool scene where it feels like he's absolved of his like sins, even though he's not. And I think it's also pretty important for the movie because it kind of establishes George Clooney's character Everett as a man who doesn't really have that much faith, which makes his last scene in this movie, where he's about to go to the gallows, to the noose, and the men are singing with him about his death, and he's just starting to pray for a miracle, and he gets it. So it feels like it ties in together with those two scenes in the beginning and in the end.
That's fair. That's why I was like, this movie's a lot of fun, just because the mythological aspect of it is interesting in and of itself, and then all the other aspects added to it. I'm like, this is really cool. I'm really mad though. I didn't watch this before.
I'm telling you, it's a good movie. I think my sister and I have seen this movie more times than we can count. We can probably recite most of the lines from this movie, and I think like the songs are just ingrained in our head, you know, like all the hymns and the songs when the sirens are singing and they're like, go to sleep little baby. God, I can't imagine how annoying we were as children for our parents with all the songs that were probably stuck in our heads because of this movie. Speaking about a song in particular, I don't know if you picked this up, because this was actually something I picked up with my most recent watch. Going back to the KKK scene, right? When character Homer starts singing that song, Oh Death. Okay. Did you like pick up on the depressing feeling as he sang? Because I didn't notice it until this watch that it's kind of this interesting choice they made by having him sing that song. Because to me, that song song very much feels like a man pleading to death to spare him just this one time so keep on living. But by having this person who is leader of the KKK singing it over the crowd of other white supremacists to a black man who's being sentenced to being death, and instead of the person who's going to be hanged singing that song about pleading to death, sparing him for this one time, instead this man who's leading the charge to hang this guy, almost kind of like mocking him, being like, I will not even allow you to beg for death because I am robbing you of not only your life but also your final words. And I might be reaching, but I thought that was a pretty interesting choice by having him sing that song.
That's interesting. That's dark.
Yeah, it's extremely dark, but like looking up the lyrics to that song, it's a sad, depressing song. I'm not going to sing the whole thing, but it's like, won't you spare me over to another year? What is this I can't see with ice cold hands taking hold of me? Well, I am death, none can excel, open the door to heaven or hell. Like, it really feels like the song of this is just someone singing to death, can you just spare me one more day? You know, I'll do whatever you want. I'll fix your feet, or I'll do anything. And it's pretty fucked up for this guy in charge of the KKK to be singing this song to a man who's about to die, you know?
Yeah, that's...
Man, the things you get from just like obsessively watching a movie, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like, you get more chances to get into it and maybe like look at things, even if it's not necessarily intentional. Mm-hmm. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, that scene doesn't mean that. And it's like, no, just like watch it, like listen to what's being said.
Yeah.
If you watch it more than once, maybe you'll understand it. Look, so one of my favorite things about movies is like actually trying to like get into like the deep nitty gritty of like what they could possibly be saying in scenes. Mm-hmm. Like that's not necessarily just like face value stuff, right? And I hate when someone's like, no, this is what they said. Like it's just like word for word exactly what they like came out their mouth. And it's like, yeah, but like you have to look into it from like the greater context of like everything going around and like what this informs about the characters and all that stuff. And it's like, no, like if it doesn't work when I hear it, it doesn't work. And I was like, man, like I really, it hurts on like an artistic level for people to be like, no, like I don't see the artistic merit of this because it didn't come across the very first time I saw it. And it's like, no, like you can, if you go deeper into it, maybe you'll see something else. And like sometimes on the other hand, I will very much be on the camp of like, no, I've looked into this deep enough, it's still dumb.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like that. But for this movie, man, I just feel like the music is so important to the movie that it makes such a big difference with it versus if it didn't include it, you know?
Yeah, no, like exactly. Like hearing it on like a regular watch, you're like, okay, yeah, this is cool, whatever. It's like they talk about music that you never knew was actually really dark. And then we're like, hey, y'all, it's actually not like an upbeat like party song. It's actually about this dude being like scorned by his lover or whatever like that. I was like, oh man, like
yeah, or on a more obvious note, Pumped Up Kids by Foster the People.
Yeah.
It's about a school shooting, you know? Kind of obvious once you start singing the lyrics, but yeah, it very much feels like sometimes it's eye-opening when you listen to the lyrics of a song and interpret it, especially in a movie, in a different way. And sometimes it's not more than it exists within the song. But for this movie, other than that scene, like it just plays such a pivotal role in this movie. Like even in the end, with the way the blind seer in the beginning comes back around, it's almost like he's going on this long journey, kind of like the Odyssey. And you see him at the very beginning and at the very end, and just like the movie started off with a song, it ends with another song, you know? Yeah. Speaking of which, did you have like a favorite performance of someone in this movie? I know recently we kind of talked about John Turturro being really fun when you see him pop up in a movie. Like you kind of recognize him from Transformers movies. And I said I recently saw him in a TV show called Severance that hopefully we can talk about one day. But like here he is, he popped up again, and I think he delivers a really fun performance as Pete, you know, with his really like I guess you could say deep southern drawl, you know?
Yeah, I like John Turturro's really good. George Clooney's obvious, pretty good. I think for me personally, out of the three, Tim Blake Nelson was like the person who stood out the most. And
dude, I love Tim Blake Nelson as an actor. When he shows up in movies, it's so interesting and good, you know? Like I really wish he would be in more things because I think he can deliver a solid range of performance.
I've watched very little of, surprisingly, I watched very little of the Coen Brothers Buster's actual filmography. But
Oh, really, man? That's crazy. I think they're some of my favorite movies.
I watched the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. So I was like, of course they would continue to work with this guy because he is great in pretty much everything that I've seen him in.
Yeah, he was great in the recent Watchmen series on
Oh,
HBO.
he was in that?
Yeah, he was Looking Glass.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, right? Yeah, he was phenomenal in that role, and he was in, like you said, Ballad of Buster Scruggs. I saw him a while ago in a TV show called Klondike,
Okay.
and he had a pretty interesting role in that show too. I mean, like I said, he pops up. He's never bad. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I don't know if he's gonna be him. He was supposed to be in the MCU. He plays the Hulk villain, the Master.
Yes, that is
He
true.
was supposed to be the Master. I don't know if he's gonna be him in the She-Hulk series. I very much was like, oh yeah, I love Tim Blake Nelson. This is gonna be great.
Oh, dude, talk about wasted potential in casting. Marvel movies, like, at this point in time, now that we're quite a bit into the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? I'd say it has a fair amount of problems to it. One of them is just like wasted talent. Casting really good actors in roles.
Then waste.
Adding to the list, other than Tim Blake Nelson, right? You have Matt Mikkelsen, who was in Doctor Strange, the first movie, as the main villain, Caecilius, right? And he was fun, and I liked him in that movie. It's a shame that, like, that was it, because I think he's a really strong actor, And, like, I know that many actors don't really want to sign on to a multi-picture contract or commit themselves to multiple movies and TV show cameo appearances, but it still feels like a waste,
Yeah, no. What's his name? The guy who plays Red Skull in Captain America.
Yeah, Hugo Weaving.
Hugo Weaving. Oh my God! You bring in Hugo Weaving for a movie, and then you drop the man. He wasn't even Red Skull for Endgame.
Yeah, and I mean, arguably, a lot of issues when it comes to actors and casting and being replaced comes down to just scheduling conflicts and other projects, or lack of interest, or negotiations, and it made sense where he ended up, but like whatever the reason is. Oh man, and then also like Donald Glover in that Spider-Man movie, the first one,
Oh man, don't get me started on that trilogy and the wasted potential storyline.
Yeah, I guess we won't drag that back up. But yeah, I love seeing Tim Blake Nelson appear in things because I think he's a phenomenal actor. And he was really good in this movie too,
The only person who like really surprised me though when I saw them, and it's only because I only really know them from very like one or two things personally, because I didn't watch a bunch of stuff with them. It's Holly Hunter. I saw Holly Hunter and I was like, hey, that's that chick who Jesse Eisenberg pissed in a bottle for Batman vs.
Oh my god, I didn't even realize that was her. Man, that's crazy.
Yeah, I was like, she's from Batman vs. Superman. And I was like, I've watched like a couple of things with her, mostly, Incredibles.
Yeah, that's how I know her from. I know her from Incredibles and this movie,
I'm like, no, piss in a bottle, guys. That's what I remember.
Yeah. Got the piss in the bottle person. Yep. Oh man, that made me laugh more harder than I expected it to.
The cast is really strong. It's a really strong cast in this movie. I like another thing that I very much enjoyed was I liked how it looked visually as well. They did the color grading to very much feel like it very clearly doesn't look like an older movie because the film quality of it is so good, right? But they're still able to do a really good job of using the color grading to like harken back to an older time. It's like they put they put the filter over it.
This is just because I love this movie so much. I know a little bit about it, right?
Okay.
This movie was a big game changer for use of color correction in big motion pictures.
Really?
Yeah. So when they were shooting this movie, right, they wanted it to capture this feeling of like an old movie that was like sepia toned, right? So they were trying to do a few things like messing with the film to like add or remove color and this and that, right? And it just didn't really work. And they shot a lot of this movie in like the South, like Tennessee,
Yeah.
in summer. So it was beautifully gorgeous greens and saturated colors. Like the South in summer and gorgeous, Yeah. So the way they got to the solution they came up with in the final result, right, was by messing with it digitally. Remember, this is like 2000, right?
Yeah.
They were digitally altering and playing with the film, and they took out the greens in the movie, which resulted in this sepia tone-like color palette that wasn't actually sepia tone. It just had the absence of green.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, isn't that really cool?
That is really cool. I didn't know it was just. I like. You would think it was more work than that, which for at the time period, obviously that is a lot of work. But
Yeah, I mean, it's like what, early 2000s computer, a person or maybe a team of people had to actively go and color correct stuff. But yeah, one of the major things they messed with was just the removal of green.
That's so cool. I would have I would have never guessed that. But yeah, if you come to the South during the summer, it's gorgeous. I remember I was driving around one day and I was like, yo, like, it's so nice here. Why do I just like pretend that it's not?
Yeah, dude, the South, it plays a trick on you if you leave the South, right? Where you're just surrounded by so much like trees and foliage, and it's really nice. And then like say you fly over, not the South in an airplane, and you're like, oh, that is a lot of concrete. That is a lot of concrete.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. I was like, so my main job, I drive around Atlanta a lot, right?
Uh-huh.
And so so thinking about how they made this movie, it's crazy. It's like thinking about like they just took the color green out because that's like insane to look at. Like, I'll drive through Atlanta and it's weird because you'll go through a pocket of Atlanta that feels like you're in like the middle of the country in Georgia, right? Where it's just like, oh yeah, there's like sidewalks and green, like full trees and big lawns and like nice houses, and you're going through it, and then like 2 seconds later you're like in the middle of the city, and I'm like, oh, what the heck? And then I'll go to like, because my dad lived in Missouri. I would go to Missouri and be like, there's not a tree in like 3 miles. Like, how do you survive here?
God, I know, right? And it feels like it's like when we talk about the issues of global warming and like deforestation of a lot of areas, and it feels so hard to put that into context for people in the South because we grow up around nature, and arguably it's something we're going to have to actively participate to make sure it doesn't all go away.
Yeah.
But like, it's just so much nice trees and nature, which is great. And the South has a lot of problems, but I would say the amount of trees that we have is a pretty nice touch,
It's a pretty nice part about it.
Yeah, it's a one nice aspect of living in the South. I mean, let's ignore everything else for now. But yeah, trees are great.
Yeah, trees are great. No, I went to someone's house and I just saw their backyard and I was like, oh my God, there's like a creek in their backyard that you could like go through the trees to get to. I remember as a child going through the woods and playing in the creek. And it's like, I've been to my uncle's house and I got to walk like 3 miles to get to a creek.
Yeah. And there's a lot of nice mixed trails of the city, but also being surrounded by nature because of like conservation efforts and stuff, which is nice too.
Yeah, there's a nice diverse ecosystem here, which is why they film so much here.
Yeah, that. But nevertheless, I think it kind of points to the nature also. Tie this back into the movie again, right? Like, it's interesting they said it in 1930s America South,
Yeah.
If you're going to do an adaptation of the Odyssey, which surprisingly more people haven't done, 1930s America, huh? What an interesting choice for a film location and time period, That's not exactly what I think of when someone says it like a historical piece. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and like it's also like not what you think about when you think of Greek epics, right? Like it's not the setting. It kind of lends itself to that in general, just because of like there is like an aristocracy to like the history of the South, and I feel like kind of does ultimately lead to that. It's like, oh yeah, no, like if I think of like old plantations, the architecture, like the culture and all that stuff, it's like I could feel like a certain level of like, not necessarily like the Greeks were like pompous, but that's kind of like the idea that a lot of people will get in their heads.
I mean, Greek and Roman architecture is super influential on like a lot of the modern world, right?
Like the columns and the color and stuff like that. So it's like, it's kind of crazy to like think about it. Like, it's like, oh, you know what? Like, it does kind of work in like the South.
I think like the story of the Odyssey and setting it in 1930s America, right? Kind of maybe lends to the idea that like stories are cyclical, the same stories kind of pop up over time, and setting it in 1930s America is like, yeah, it might be like an adaptation of the Odyssey, but these stories pop up throughout history, even in, the American South, right?
I wonder what it would be like in modern day.
I mean, I'm saying, man, we're going back to the 12 Angry Men discussion. I'm surprised they haven't tried to adapt this story for modern times because all the material's there,
I'm sure if someone has, it's just not as obvious or as good.
Oh yeah, possibly. I mean, hey, maybe there's a student film out there that tried to do that, and just didn't get off the ground.
They're like, this does not translate to modern day Seattle the way that it did in Oh Brother Where Art Thou in the South. Like, yeah, I guess you're right. It doesn't really fit there.
Yeah, I mean, but you could do it easily. Like, you just need a little bit of creativity towards it. Like people readapt stories like Romeo and Juliet and place it in like the hood or the ghetto, or like they reimagine it as like a story between a rich nobleman and a like just common person, but like in England or something.
Yeah, or it's like a Puerto Rican and like a white dude and gangs in New York.
Yeah, exactly. Man, it's a shame they haven't done that yet. That sounds like a great opportunity for a movie.
That sounds like a perfect pitch, actually.
Yeah, someone should tell that guy that's really popular. What's his name? Bin Manuel Miranda, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they should call him up and tell him.
I'm sure he would knock it out of the park.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a little on the nose, though.
But
yeah, dude, man, this movie's great. I love it. I think it's weird this movie's effect on pop culture over the time it's been released.
Okay.
Because like I don't think it pops up in conversation that frequently, but it does pop up when people talk about the Odyssey or like movies with a lot of meaning in it. You know what I mean? Like it popped up in high school when we were discussing like stories, and it pops up when people discuss, Tim Blake Nelson or John Turturro. And funny enough, I don't know if you remember anything about this movie at the time, but like I don't remember it being received super well at the time it was released. Do you have any recollection of that?
I mean, I was like, you said it came out in 2000? I was like 5.
Yeah. I just remember telling people, have they seen this movie? And they were like, no. I mean, because they were kids and I was a kid, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. They were like, I watched Jimmy Neutron. What are you talking about?
Yeah. I don't remember that many adults talking about this movie. I looked up reviews from that time, and a lot of people were kind of like a little harsh on this movie, being like, it doesn't do enough, or it wasn't as good as it could have been.
I think it's so clever. It's not as good as it could have been. I don't know what the heck they're looking at. There's so much depth to like a lot of the writing.
Yeah, a review I saw from that time period, it was like, ever since the movie came out, it hasn't gained attraction as it should have. It's sitting at like 60% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I'm like, no way, it is not sitting at 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I looked it up, it's like at 80% now or something. Like I think this movie has won people over in like the 22 years it's been released.
That's crazy. It's crazy to look at movies that are like, was this movie considered good? And it's like, no, it actually wasn't.
Yeah, and like this movie wasn't bad, it just wasn't like amazing. And I guess if you compare it to like Fargo, another one of their movies,
yeah.
I could see maybe people being like, oh yeah, it was good, but it wasn't as good as Fargo, But like, man, this movie's great. I love this movie, and like I definitely want to show, like, if I ever have a child, I want to show them this movie and be like, don't tell to your school that I showed you this movie this early. Or something, man. It's just a good movie that I want to share with more people.
And I think this movie is this.
Oh, is that the Coen brothers finally calling you back on Discord?
No, I think they said they're busy today, unfortunately. Okay, I was like looking up like references that were like movies that referenced this movie, right? Mm-hmm. And they said it was a documentary about the music in the movie.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't think I've never seen that movie, but the singers for the songs in this movie wasn't the actual actors. George Clooney, when he would sing, right, it wasn't actually him. It would be this other musician who's pretty popular named Daniel. I'm gonna butcher his last name. Temiski. He's like a bluegrass guy. I don't know if he's still active, but he was around that time. And the guy who sings "Oh Death" was also a really famous singer.
Yeah.
And just a lot of really popular or a lot of talented singers lend their like voice and talents to the songs in these movies.
I was actually like, man, these guys could really sing. I was like, I bet you $50 it's not actually them.
Man, sometimes that will surprise you, but no, not for this one. I don't know if that was Tim Blake Nelson though, singing or not, because I think he can sing.
I'll say it is. I'm gonna give that guy the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna give that man credit right now if he is. Okay. Tim Blake Nelson does his own singing, but otherwise is dubbed by Pat Enright. He sings on the song In the Jailhouse Now, but when he sings outside of that song in the movie, it's done by someone else. So yeah, he can sing.
Okay. So I'm looking at references, and I realized that pretty much any time you have a TV show where they have like, oh mother, where art thou? Or oh brother, where art thou? It's like, oh, it's just a reference. Got it.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Man, this movie's. I love this movie. It's so good. Watch the next movies we're gonna do. I'm gonna just find a way to bring this movie back up, just like 12 Angry Men. You know.
I'm gonna bring it up every time.
Yeah. I don't know if I would say this is probably my favorite movie. Like 12 Angry Men is for you, but like, man, it's up there. I just don't know if I have a favorite movie. You know.
That's fair. I say 12 Angry Men is my favorite movie because it's like so influential. But like, if someone was like, "Oh, do you want to watch that movie right now?" I'm like, I don't need to.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. If someone hasn't seen this movie and there's time, I'd be like, yeah, let's watch it. And if someone has seen this movie and they suggest it, I'm like, I've kind of already seen it a lot, you know?
Yeah, my favorite movies like it's like technicalities that are like why they're my favorite, right? Like for like my top 5, it's like 12 Angry Men, Moulin Rouge. I think it's like Mulan, Scott Pilgrim, and can't remember what I had at 5 for the longest. But it always switched. Like it would be like, oh, it's Baby Driver, it's Man of Steel, which that's what's the word, controversial. It'd be like something like that where it's like just a movie that I really really like. Oh no, the most recent one was Into the Spider-Verse, which might just stay up there forever because that movie is gold.
Yeah, no, it's great. I guess to finish this conversation up, right? It feels like this is one of these movies, right, that I think is kind of lost for anyone that didn't grow up with cable TV. Because, like you said, you saw some of this movie as it would pop up on like FX.
FX, yeah. Yep.
And like that's how I watched quite a bit of the times I've seen it too. Just it pop up on TV. I'd be like, there's nothing else for me to watch. I love this movie. I'm gonna watch it, right? So it's kind of sad that you would have to get suggested these kind of movies.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you might not see them, and it's a shame, you know, because it's not like you have cable TV where you kind of just watch something because it's on, you know. And now you got streaming where you could selectively choose what you want to watch at all times.
Yeah, and like the algorithm will like pretty much make it where you'll never see these movies pop up, which is really unfortunate because it's like, so for example, right? Recently, I finally watched Top Gun. Because obviously Top Gun Maverick came out, right? I would have never, because of how everything is, Top Gun has been available for free on Amazon Prime for like forever or whatever, and it was on Netflix for like months. I would have never seen it if a sequel didn't come out and they weren't pushing it like, hey, look, we have it on our streaming service. Otherwise, like, if a sequel doesn't come out, you know, I would have never have even known Oh Brother, Where Art Thou was on Amazon Prime until you told me to watch that we were going to watch it.
Yeah. And I think people might get suggested this movie if they start watching some of the Coen Brother movies, you know, because the algorithms on streaming services usually push similar directors or movies, right?
Yeah.
And I hope more people watch this movie because I feel like over time it's kind of gained a more positive viewing upon it.
Yeah.
I think personally there's a lot you can pull from it or look into it like I have, and I think it's just a solid movie, you know?
Yeah, I think people should probably go and just it's one of the things where it's like, yeah, it's kind of hard to go and find older movies that you may have missed because you really don't know what you're looking for, right? But 9 times out of 10, if you have a favorite director or if you have like a favorite like genre, there's dozens of movies you've missed. And likely there will be like, if you just like stick around certain things, you're like, okay, yeah, no, I'll watch a bunch of what's his name?
Edgar Wright is a guess.
Not Edgar Wright. I'm blanking on the name right now. Oh my God, why am I always doing this?
Christopher Nolan.
No, guy who did Pulp Fiction.
Oh, Quentin Tarantino.
Like, you watch a bunch of Quentin Tarantino films. I feel like, based off the other ones, I feel like I'm more likely to get a Coen Brother movie after watching a Quentin Tarantino film than...
Yeah, I could probably see that.
Then like you're watching, like, you know, Django Unchained, and then they're like, oh, you know what? Old-timey movie that has to do with, you know, the South. Oh, brother, where art thou?
Yeah, although I will say, I think if we're doing related movies that might end up watching this movie.
Oh yeah, those are not similar in the slightest.
No, they're good. I like those movies though, but I feel like the Coen brothers, I guess, to talk a little bit about their, like, I guess, film chronology or of movies they've done, right?
Yeah.
They lean more towards serious dramas than they do comedies. There's comedies in them, or like comedic moments in them, but I feel like most of the ones that I enjoy the most are kind of like serious or somber. And this one is kind of feels like one of those that isn't as serious, but has a lot of lighthearted moments and funny in it. You know, like The Big Lebowski.
I think there's a lot of wit in their movies. They're like smart.
Yeah, for sure. Another movie I would love to do that's related to them that I don't think that many people have seen, but it's one of my favorite of their movie collections is Inside Llewyn David.
Okay.
Have you seen that movie?
Nope.
Very somber, I would say. To me, that movie is about the struggles of creativity, but that might be fun to do for the future. You know?
Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah. And also stars a currently beloved actor that's in, I think, almost everything, Oscar Isaac. But yeah, pretty good point to wrap it up.
Okay, we're going to do a wrap up now.
Yeah, so like, thanks for listening to this episode of the Just Pick Something podcast. If you haven't seen Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, I don't know what you were listening to this movie. Maybe you just wanted a recommendation and you stopped halfway through and were like, all right, yeah, sold. I'm going to go watch this movie now. Awesome. And if you have, man, tell me how much you love this movie in the comments or the reviews or whatever. I don't know where we can read them. You can try YouTube when this eventually goes on there. We're more likely to see any comments on YouTube versus, Apple Podcast reviews or Spotify reviews, if you can even write them there now, you know?
Graham, on one of our reels, tell us how wrong we are.
Yeah, thank you for that, engagement, my dude. I really appreciate that engagement. Come on, drive this video up. Come on, get it to more eyeballs.
Man.
For now, thanks for listening. The intro and outro song for this podcast is VHS Dreams by Sean Ivers. The link is always in the description because you always gotta give credit. And thanks for listening and tune in next time.